All right, guys. So welcome to another video. This is not really a review, but this is the Broken Tokens Blood Rage Box Organizer. This is an officially licensed insert organizer from CMON, Cool Mini or Not, for their board game Blood Rage. Done properly and properly put together, it can actually handle every single expansion, every single miniature, every single token for all of Blood Rage, the core set, as well as all the expansions and the promotional materials. This is based in the United States, actually in California, where I'm from. And it is essentially considered the kind of the standard, the class of its league for Blood Rage inserts. There are other solutions out there, but they're not licensed. There's quite a few actually in Germany that do it. There's a foam, and then there's of course the wooden inserts. So, I actually, like I said, I think in passing in one of my previous videos, I actually bought multiple of these, and we're going to see how they work. This is the first one that came in. I'm going to build it together. There's another one from Game Doctors in Germany, which is going to be shipped to my painting service in Romania. They're going to assemble it for me. And there's going to be some modifications that might be necessary depending on whether you want to do painted miniatures and protect them or just regular unpainted. And I'll go over that. So before even building, I did a lot of research. This is very good on multiple fronts. However, there are some issues. We'll see if I run into any of them. Sometimes they could splinter a little bit. Sometimes the joints can be too tight, necessitating a little bit of sanding or even using a rubber mallet, for instance, to gently force it together. Other times it could be too loose, requiring a little bit of wood glue in order to, again, seal those joins. Sometimes the problem is bad enough that you actually have to have a replacement insert, which from all I've heard, Broken Token is very, very good about. I mean, at the end of the day, one insert, it's a couple bucks, $1, maybe less. They're going to send it out, no problems. So let's build it and let's see what it looks like, how it fits. Again, they've gone through a couple of versions of this. I mean, this has been out for a little while. So hopefully this is one of the latest versions and it's going to fit together very well. And there won't be some of the issues that people have brought up in the past. Okay, so we're going to splice, again, the sections. So we'll go bit by bit and we'll go on from there. So I'll see you for the next section. Okay, so welcome to the next segment. So I already removed the insert parts from one of the sheets. So this is the way it comes, these sheets. These are going to be the clan inserts. So each insert, each of these sheets, when you build them, you're going to have a box, and they're going to house basically all the members of the clan. And I think for Broken Token, you're going to have the leader, the 8 warriors, the ship, as well as the 2 shamans or the 2 mystics. So one of these boxes will hold essentially 12 miniatures. So just want to do a quick sort of overview of at this stage of the steps. There's 6 of these, so the rest of the 5 are in here, one for each of the clans. And then the top sheet, I think you have the sides here for each of the 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then you have, of course, the designations. So one thing to note, they are held in place. We typically through this little area right here. I don't know if you can tell, again, focus is hard. I'm doing this outdoors, but you can see this little notch. So this is sort of where it's, kind of attached to the sheet, and you take it out by kind of twisting it. So you have to do it, somewhat carefully. You don't want to shatter it. And when you do, there are going to be some areas where hopefully you can see. In this case, there's a little bit of wood right here that's left over, and it's pretty simple. You just kind of carefully, move it over, and you just get rid of it. So these are the little tiny splinters that can come from that. Again, you don't want to be too rough, because if you do, you could kind of actually shatter these pieces of wood. They're not that thick. I don't think so far the little tiny depressions I feel mandates any sandpaper or anything like that, but this could be a reason why it joins a little bit tight, depending on, again, how well or how loosely it's attached to the sheets. So you're going to have 6 of these and then 6 of these. And then you're going to take apart these guys, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Take that apart and then put them together, and then it makes for one box. You do it 6 times. So let's kind of see how that goes. By the way, Broken Token has a very nice instructional video on YouTube that shows you step by step how it's done, and they also have very nice instructions as well. So this is certainly, you know, I mean, not brain surgery or rocket science by any stretch of the imagination. It's pretty straightforward. But again, you know, the question is at the very end of the day, yes, it's easy to build. It's just putting literally a box together. But the question is, how well do those different parts of the box fit together? Okay, so basically, let's move on to the next stage, which is building the very first box with the components we see here. This should be reasonably easy. Some of the later ones, like the monster inserts, require a little bit more to do, but this is a nice way to just sort of get you warmed up, so to speak. Okay, so I'll see you for the next section, and hopefully this goes well. All right, again, this is the first time I've built anything from Broken Token. I'm a complete rookie at this, so let's see how I do. Okay, so we just built the first clan box. This took not too long. I mean, a couple of minutes, so not bad at all. We'll see how the rest of the 5 go, but a few things to notice about this. So number one, at least for mine, which I just arbitrarily chose to make this the wolf, but any one of these, of course, you can just put here. At least for mine, these 3 pieces, 1, 2, 3, obviously are removable. They're what keeps the tokens in place, what keeps the minifigures locked into position. So whatever you do, do not glue these. But at least for me, I was able to put all of these together without any glue at all. I was prepared to use glue, but again, you know, the various joins are going to vary depending on just how they laser cut these. And at least for the first one I built, it was very tight, okay? So there was no need at all to use glue whatsoever. Maybe some areas like the very edge here, you could use a touch of glue to get the corners set. But again, since this was my first time building one, I just kind of wanted to get a feel for it, see how tight things were. I was prepared to, you know, break it apart and then do it again with the glue. But it was really tight fit. And you can actually hear the wood kind of creak as you snapped it into position. And so again, you know, this is very stable. It's not going to fall apart in any, you know, by any stretch of the imagination, I don't think. So for this one, at least, no glue necessary. So these are the bars to keep the minifigures in place. They're easily removable. They're held in place in snaps here and here. It is very tight, but you just basically lift up. You lift up here, so that's off. You lift up here, you lift up here, and that's off. And then, of course, here, it's a little bit trickier. You have to sort of rock it. So you take that off here. Okay, so let's take a look at the actual box itself. So essentially, you start off with the base. As you can see, there is a notation for the ship, so you can tell exactly the orientation of where it should be. So the ship is right here, and then you put the vertical separators, 1 here, 2 here, 3 here, and then you put the top and the bottom. These are symmetrical. Take note, all of this stuff has to, you know, kind of be placed very tight, and it has to fit in very nicely. This here was so tight that putting it in, it actually splintered just a little bit on the inside here. I had to kind of move it off and then kind of use the screwdriver to put a little tiny piece of chipped wood back in position and snap it in place. So again, this area could be a little bit soft, but as you can see, just, you know, dropping it, it's extremely sturdy. This is with no wood glue at all. I feel very comfortable passing it from, you know, person to person during play. I don't think this is going to fall apart anytime soon. Again, you know, you're holding it from various areas. This part here is a little bit loose. I might glue this in here, and then over here, again, just the weight of it. So very tight fit for everything except for this thing. Maybe this is a little bit loose. As you can see, this will come out. So I might put a little bit of glue here just to reinforce it. But otherwise, very tight fit for this one, actually. Okay, I'm going to build the rest of the 5, and we'll see again. If any of those require glue, maybe we'll get a few loose joints. This is an example of a very tight joint, actually. Again, no sandpaper necessary, but I did have to make some modification here just because this was so big. It just want to go through, the crevice right here. And the only part that was maybe... Okay, so here we go. Sorry for getting cut off for the last video. I got a phone call during the middle of it, but there wasn't much to say. So this is all 6 clang inserts built. And so I'm gonna put this down. You can take a look at it like this. So basically they're all essentially the same. You have, the wild boar, the wolf, the raven, the ram, the bear, and the serpent. We'll just focus on one here. So essentially, and again, sorry for the dim lighting, I'm doing this in the garage. It's a little bit more quiet here, and this is kind of the table where I build them. I don't want to get the little tiny bits of splinters or wood or all that stuff else all over the place. So again, because I'm in the garage, the lighting is a little bit dim, but again, we're just looking at wooden inserts here. This is not like super detailed statue reviews or anything like that. So basically, you build a box. There's one section here for the tokens. This is where sort of the, I don't know what this is, laser etched symbol with the name, Bear Clan or the bear is here. So this is very nice, easily removed. And then these are the two slats or whatever you want to call it. That's used to hold your miniatures in place. So, I think Broken Token has been making this insert for quite a while, at least a year to the best of my knowledge, maybe longer. And there's been some feedback, some people have complained that it's really loose and it's falling apart and all of that. So this is sort of the bulk of the insert, which is there to store all of your clans and the mystics or shamans. So having built all 6 of them, here's my sort of criteria, and I'll do an overall review later. My criteria is these come together extremely well and extremely tight. Maybe they modified it a little bit in response to some of the constructive criticism and feedback, or maybe, I don't know, I just got a particular set of inserts that were very tight, but they were real tight. Okay, required quite a bit of pressure and force to get everything to basically slot together. I think I used maybe glue, like maybe 5 to 7 drops of glue. I think for 2 of these sets, the ends were a little touch loose. I just put a few drops here and put it in so that it'll kind of hold a little bit better. And there were about 2 or 3 that were so tight, literally I was able to lift it from one end and it wasn't budging at all. So those things required no glue at all. It snapped together real tight. You can actually hear the wood literally creaking as you are putting everything together. So extremely stable. That's my opinion. When doing it, it does require a little bit of touch. There's a lot of different sort of areas where it's supposed to slot in position, and everything kind of has to fit all at the same time. I would recommend starting by matching up the ends, the end tabs, and then the center tab right here. This is a critical tab in the center. You really want to make sure that this thing goes in nicely, and then you get it in, you get the end, you get the middle. Make sure the middle is critical. You got to get that in there. You don't want that wood to crack or anything if you can avoid it, and then the bottom all comes along. So, in my opinion, can you use wood glue like they recommend and like the video shows? You can, but it could get a little bit messy because you're going to put these little drops of wood glue in there, and it's so tight that it could get kind of all over the place as you're struggling to line up everything and then press it tightly together. I think that wood glue is more appropriate when all of these are super loose, and then you can sort of take your time, put the glue in there, get it all together, press tightly, and then wait for it to dry. But again, whether it's because they responded to criticism by making it cutting another pattern that's just a little bit different by a millimeter or half a millimeter and making it tighter, or whether I just happen to get that type of set, there's just no room to put glue. I don't think you need it. Just a few areas, again, at the very end, a few drops here or there in some areas, and that's all you need. Another thing is people have wondered why not use crazy glue. Why do you have to use wood glue? This is the wood glue I just bought from them since I bought, buy the insert, might as well just get it. I don't want to go to Home Depot to get, the wood glue. This is more than good enough. I think wood glue is sort of important if you're going to use any glue at all, because again, there's a lot of fiddling and cracking. It takes a while just to get everything to slot together perfectly, and then you press and you hear the creak as it comes together. And you do crazy glue, you do not have any margin for error, and you simply don't have time to do that before the glue kind of hardens. A lot of super glue hardens within, as you know, seconds, 10, 20 seconds, it's already hardened. The wood glue gives you a lot more play, a lot more time to get things there, to experiment and just kind of get all that set together. So I'm definitely, do not use super glue for this type of thing. Use the wood glue. That's what they're there for. And just a tiny, tiny little dab. I mean, do not use a lot of it. A touch, a little gentle touch with gentle pressure, a dot is really all you need. So again, that's at least my experience. So far, the bulk of the building is these 6. They're going to house well over 50% of your miniatures. So this is a really important step. So far as this goes, really satisfied at how it all came together. Of course, putting the miniatures in them and then just sort of analyzing what's the best way to do it without damaging the miniatures is a whole different story, and we'll get to that in a separate segment. But as far as building them, it's aces, really, really good. And again, I mentioned it multiple times during this segment. I'm going to mention it again. At least for mine, they come together extremely tight. Be sure to just really go over once over and keep pressing on all the joins. You're going to hear that wood creak as it snaps into position. And as long as you're hearing the creak and snap, you want to keep on applying gentle pressure, kind of doing what I'm doing right now. Just sort of really going to the bases and making sure everything's kind of joined together. That's important, okay? And again, don't be surprised if you only need to use a couple drops. Again, the middle part's very, very tight. Only the end sometimes requires a little touch of glue just to get the corner set. But even that, for some of these, not necessary. At least for half of them, to my memory, 3 to 4 of them came together so tight that literally there was no give at all. You could just even without these to reinforce, you could just grab one end and lift it straight up, and literally it didn't budge at all. So overall, a great start. And let's go into the next segment where I'm going to make a few of the smaller boxes for the tokens and the cards to see, again, if the wood glue is necessary for that stage. Okay, guys, so next segment. Now, the Broken Tokens video guide to assemblage, they're going to go next to the simple boxes. So here, you're going to make one box, just basically a floor with 4 walls, and then, of course, the pillage tokens lasered on the top. You just simply put as a lid, and it goes on very nicely like that. This is where you take it off, and then you snap it using the tiles here. And you want to be gentle. You don't want to force it. I mean, this is not metal or anything, but again, kind of tricky to do with one hand. But in essence, you just sort of, you can see the slots where they're supposed to sit. Excuse me, and then you just sort of gently put it in, and you're set. Here's the larger box for the Ragnarok tokens, and again, same idea. Put it in, and then the lid goes on here like this. Okay, so these are the 2 boxes. No glue at all for these 2 either. They snap together extremely, extremely tightly. A very good fit. So again, the trend continues where the parts do snap together extremely robustly, as you can see. They're not falling apart, and there's no glue at all used in any of these boxes. So again, the 6 clan trays, and I got the Ragnarok tokens and the pillage tokens. You put it over there. So this one is where you're going to put the age 1, 2, and 3 cards. Again, in situations where you're fitting 4 things together to build sort of like a box. There's no lid here. You're putting the cards in. This is extremely, extremely solid. And again, They sound like a broken record. Extremely tight fit, not one drop of glue used. And again, you can see very, very sturdy. It doesn't come close to, again, coming apart. Okay, so now after you do this and you do this, they want you actually to move on to the monster stuff. And the monster stuff I would wait on a little bit later. Those are the ones where you have that little spring clip at the bottom to hold the monsters, the big monsters. And I can't believe that you won't be, you have to glue that, I think. So I'm leaving the two big monster ones for last. I did this one for the cards. And then the next segment, I'm going to go ahead and do the Gods of Asgard and the small monsters. These are, again, two boxes, and then we save the big monsters for last. Okay, so see you for the next segment. Okay, so next stage. This is a pretty simple stage. You're making the small monsters insert box, and then making the Gods of Asgard insert box. It's pretty simple. It's just basically, a box bottom with 4 sides, and then the lid you put on. They're, as you can see, essentially identical, basically exactly the same size, and all symmetrical. Again, with this build, no glue whatsoever, extremely perfect fit, and you can actually hear the wood again snap into place. They're considered enough to actually put the words up on it. You can look for that. So that means that this is actually supposed to be facing up, and then you build around that and you put the lid on top. As it turns out, I didn't see that for the Gods of Asgard. I saw it for the monsters, but once you snap it into place, I didn't want to kind of redo it. And as it stands, the fit is completely symmetrical. So at least in this case, it really doesn't matter how you do it, okay? So in any case, this is the Gods of Asgard one, and then here is the monsters one. In this one, as you can see, there is no up, so I did actually build it correctly. So this is the 2 smaller boxes. I'm gonna put that aside, and then let's go on to the last one, which is the trays housing the big monsters. Now, they modified it in the first iteration of this. They actually have werewolf on here, and you snap the werewolf in. But as it turned out, this was a bit of a mistake, because if you buy the 5th player expansion extra figures Kickstarter exclusive, there's another dwarf chieftain, and that dwarf chieftain has a spear pointing straight up. It's extremely long, and you can't fit that dwarf chieftain in the regular monsters box without bending the spear, which is obviously unacceptable. As part of the conceit of this Broken Tokens insert set is to try to protect painted miniatures. So they decided to get rid of the name. I don't know, in reality, you should just put Dwarf Chieftain here, because this is the only way you're gonna be able to put it in. So you put the Dwarf Chieftain here, and you put the werewolf or the wolfman in the small box where he fits perfectly. So this one, guys, was a nightmare to do. So let me explain why that is. Again, not a drop of glue used in either this one or this one. So essentially, what's happening here is you're putting these little tiny wooden like stretchers or ribs or whatever you want to call them. You have to put them right below this, and you're supposed to glue these two together, and then you glue it into the wall. The problem here is if you look at the bottom, you can't see it because the floor is in. There is a tab right over here, and here for the top one, it's I think, I don't know, like 1.5 centimeters. And at the bottom, it's like half that size, and that's where this thing fits in. And for mine, at least for this one, the fit was just super, super tight. Oh, here it is actually. This is where you can see it. It was so tight that it wouldn't fit in. And this is the only area where, as you're building it, this entire strip, these 2 strips, these 2 huge vertical horizontal floors are basically secured in the early stage just with this tab. And so I had to really, what I had to do was I did this separately. I did the bottom one first to get it into this position. and it was laser cut so that it was a little bit thick. And so I had to force the top one on top of it. And I forced it so hard, I don't know if you could tell, a sliver of wood actually had to be chipped off. This is a situation where normally you would have to sand it a little bit, I think, to get it to fit better. But I didn't do that. I just exerted a lot of force, and eventually I got it in. But it was a very difficult thing to do. As you can tell, hopefully from here, you can't put a lot of force everywhere else. I mean, putting force here and here doesn't help because, again, the tab is right here. So you have to put force right here with your finger. And this is the only place we can do it. Over here, you can't do it anywhere else. You'll snap this, you'll break it. So number one, this was super hard to get in. Forget glue. With glue, it might have been even impossible because that would have added a little bit more thickness. But it was super hard just to get this thing into position. After that's in, you then have to put the side of the box in against this. This is the top. You see the top? This is the top floor. This is the bottom floor. And it creates this nice little shape here. This was also extremely thick on this side and also extremely thick on this side. And quite frankly, it doesn't fit. Again, I don't even know how you can use sandpaper to try to make this better, but essentially you do the best you can, you fit everything else in, and then you have to usually gently use a mallet to essentially force it in. You may even crack the wood a little bit here, as you can see, but you finally get it in, and then you get this really nice, like you essentially obliterate the gap from here by pounding up here. I don't have a mallet because, again, this is not the sort of thing I build every day, so I've never needed a mallet. So what I did was I just put like an old t-shirt, undershirt over this and just gently tap with a hammer, tap, 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 tap. And you can hear it cracking and just basically pray that you don't essentially destroy the wood doing this, and you get it in. So this thing is essentially super sturdy, no glue needed. I thought for sure you would need a glue, but the way it was put together, this was actually the opposite problem, way too tight to fit. And again, you had to use a mallet to do it. So for here, it's essentially the same idea, except of course you have the four big monsters, the fire giant, the frost giant, and the sea serpent and the troll. And here's the same idea, but luckily these two, at least for my build, it fit into the tab here essentially perfectly. Top and then bottom, perfect fit. You can actually see that they're very intelligent. They made this pattern, the top and the bottom, a little bit different from here, which, as you can see, is a bit more symmetrical. So here, different from here. So definitely, when you remove all the little pieces, there's only one way it's going to be built. There's only one way to fit it. Okay. So this part, luckily, was not too tight. It slotted in perfectly. Okay. Boom. But again, the same problem on the side. One side fit in very nicely, but the other side, again, was just too big, not perfect, did not go all the way. So if you look, there was a little bit of here, there's no real gap at all. That was fine. But if you look on this side, there is like a sub-millimeter gap, very tiny amount right here. You can actually feel the little gap. Again, this part doesn't fit all the way in. I tried to mallet it or hammer it as gently as I could, but anymore I would have basically destroyed this part. And so I just stopped. It's less than maybe 1/2 millimeter, 1/4 of a millimeter. So we'll see if that impacts the way this thing fits in. Otherwise, it fit together perfectly. So essentially, this is the Broken Tokens insert. You've got the two trays for the big monsters and the Dwarf Chieftain right over here. You have the two boxes for the small monsters and the Gods of Asgard expansion right over here. This is for your cards, and this does support sleeves. So the sleeves does add quite a bit of height. So I'm going to put the sleeves in here. If you have every single card, every single expansion, it's like close to 150 cards. So I think I counted, and I think it's like close to 40 per age. So we'll see if it actually fits nicely, with all this, the sleeve protection and etc. So this is for the cards. And then, of course, you have separate boxes for the Pillage tokens and for the Ragnarok tokens. I think this is the box where you can put in some of the 3D tokens from the Kickstarter set. And then finally, the core of it all is the 6 clan boxes for the wolf, the bear, the serpent, the raven, the wild boar, and the ram. Those are the 6, and here in this area, you put all of the tokens, the little 3D tokens from the Kickstarter. You just kind of dump them all in here, and then the miniatures go in here, 12 of them. The leader, 8 warriors, the ship, and the 2 mystics or shamans. So this together is the broken token insert all built. All told, this took me a couple hours. I took my time. I looked at the YouTube videos of the assembly. It's actually pretty intuitive. There's not too many areas that was too tricky. They keyed it very intelligently, so that I think the hardest, obviously, are the 2 big monster trays. I saved those last. Everything else is just basically boxes, and so they just fit together a certain way. It's pretty intuitive. Again, absolutely, really no need for glue. I think I used probably a couple of drops again for some of these clan sets inserts where the sides might have been a little bit loose. I just kind of locked down the corners with a touch of glue, and again, half of those snap together with absolutely no problems. In fact, the problem with my particular set, which is I think the better problem to have in a sense, is it was just too tight and required a little bit of luck almost in this part here. And again, Broken Tokens is very generous with sending another cut if you wish. And so just contact them, and they'll send you one of these guys as a replacement if you can't get it to work, or if you break it somehow by putting it together. They know it's not an exact science, so from what I understand, they're very generous about that. No problems there. So overall, without actually putting in the minifigures and the components of the game, and without putting all of this stuff into the core box, my initial impression is very positive. There was a lot of complaints, for instance, about, oh, this feels like matchsticks, it doesn't feel sturdy enough, and all of that. As far as that goes, I don't think those are legitimate complaints, or maybe they were previously, but Broken Tokens definitely addressed them very, very nicely. If they did modify the laser cuts, they did it in a positive fashion. Every one of these snapped together so beautifully and so tightly. Again, this is essentially a glue-free operation. So nothing but the highest marks there. It feels very sturdy. The wood is very good quality. It just feels good in general. It feels like something that you can definitely take out, play with, very durable. Again, there are some areas where the fit is a little bit too tight. You might have to mallet some of them, but that's a very small nitpick. Overall, beautifully keyed, beautifully fit together. And that's as far as that goes. Now, the next step, of course, is to actually put the miniatures in and see how all of this fits together, and whether it really could, protect, for instance, the miniatures from being damaged if they're truly painted. And of course, if you paint them, the paint can vary from, just tabletop ready to works of art, right? There are people who win crystal brushes or golden demons, sometimes painting miniatures. So the idea then, if you're going to try to protect them, is you're supposed to stabilize the miniature, keep them immobile, whatever orientation the core box set is placed, and they must be free of contact with both each other and the wall. I mean, that is the theory behind protection. And if you have $1,000 paint job for all of your miniatures, or for a $4,000, $5,000 paint job, obviously, the standards are very different in terms of what you can forgive. So this set is going to require some modification, or it's going to be found lacking, but we'll get to that, or we'll cross that bridge when we get to that. So the next section, I'm going to just slowly put all of these guys, technically, if you can imagine, it's amazing. All of this, except for the game night kit, but all of that is going to fit in just this. And all of this is going to fit right in there. So let's see, again, in practice, how this all works. Okay, guys, so for you guys, it'll be like this instant cut, but for me, it took over like an hour and a half to do all of this. There was just a ton of pieces you can imagine to put together, but here it goes. We've done it. So the way I have it organized, we have the 6 clan inserts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. As you can see, each of them are locked into position. So the ship goes down here. The leader, because of the tall totem pole that the leader has, goes opposite the ship. And then you fit the warriors and the shaman for the rest of it. Inside this little holding area, you can put the 4 monster bases, 2 large, 2 small. You can put the 3D clan tokens from the Kickstarter, as well as the regular cardboard punch-out clan tokens. And then you have a glory token at the very, very bottom. I do put the Mystic card for that clan. It's sleeved and thus protected. So you can see that card is there. Because again, it's not a first, second, or third age card. It's just kind of there to remind you of the power of the Mystic, and so it doesn't really belong, for instance, in the card deck. So each one of these clan insert boxes has the 1 Mystic clan card, and then you have all of these things here. Now the interesting thing about the Wild Boar clan box is that because that was a Kickstarter exclusive, and that exclusive came with all of the 3D clan tokens, the Wild Boar does not actually have the cardboard punch-out 2D clan token. Please correct me if I'm mistaken, but I didn't find it in the Kickstarter box set. So as far as that goes, it doesn't have that. But every other clan, from the ram to the serpent to the boar, etc., they have, of course, in addition to the in addition to the 3D clan tokens, they also have, of course, the cardboard punch-outs. So here's these 6, and then here you can put every single card in its place. These are sleeved, and there is space to accommodate the sleeve. It's a little puffy because of the sleeves, obviously, but no problems fitting all of them. And this includes all of the Mystic cards, all of the 5th player expansion cards, and all of the, of course, the special monster cards from the Kickstarter exclusive. So it's pretty full, very elegant, very nice. You can put it like this, and then you can, of course, use it during gameplay. So that's the card holder. In the Ragnarok tokens box, let me see if I can actually open it nicely. You put the Ragnarok cardboard punch-outs. You put the first player cardboard punch-out, and then you can put the 3D Doom first player and Saga tokens as well. There's a lot of space in this thing, as you can see, because it has to fit the relatively large Ragnarok cardboard punch-outs. Thor here is a major problem, which we will revisit in a second, but because it's such a nice box, he very comfortably just sort of fits and sits in here. So let's put that aside. The pillage tokens just has all of the cardboard pillage tokens, of which there are 9 total, as well as the Saga token and the Doom token, so nothing too exceptional there. Finally, we have the Gods of Asgard. This actually will stabilize and hold all 7 Gods of Asgard, as well as Odin's throne. We're going to put this aside and talk about it in some detail later. And then these are where you put the small monsters. Let's take a look over here. So this is where you put the large ones. It's labeled nicely. There's Mountain Giant, Mystic Troll. This is obscured by the God cards, but if you want to get that out of the way, you can clearly see that Fenrir is also labeled as well. This was originally slated for the Wolfman, which in my opinion is a little bit silly. He's basically the size of a regular monster, so to put him in this space here probably wasn't necessary, but cleverly you were able to put the Dwarf Chieftain here and then to put the Wolfman here, and it works very nicely. You can't put the Dwarf Chieftain in the small monster box because the spear is too long, and once you straighten it, you would have to bend it in order to put it here, which is, again, you don't really want to do that. Over time, that will snap the spear, even if it is plastic. And of course, if you paint it, that's the last thing you want. So the height of the spear mandates that it be placed in sort of the bigger the bigger monsters area, the tray. Now, for again, whatever reason, they made the Gods of Asgard optional expansion God cards like a tarot card size, which is awfully inconvenient. And so there's really no place to put this. You can always put it, of course, with the general instructions, etc. But it just seems to fit here pretty nicely. You just slot it right over here, and then Fenrir holds it in pretty decent position. Again, there's going to be a little bit of added thickness because of the sleeve protection. So here's that. And then over here is the big monsters, the fire giant, the troll, the sea serpent, and the frost giant. So I have not attempted to put all of these components into the core set yet. That'll be the next section. And of course here, I also threw in the instructions for the broken token insert. You have the 6 clan sheets from each of the 6 clans. Then you have the Valhalla, the Valhalla sheet, and then the Saga sheet, and of course the board itself at the bottom of the instruction booklet. So all that's supposed to layer on the top. So before going into the last section, which will be how it fits all together, let me give very brief thoughts about what's going on with these inserts. So number one, if you don't paint these miniatures, or if you paint them yourself to be tabletop ready, or if you commission, let's just say, a professional painter to give you like a level 1 or 2 paint job, then, which by the way, for a project of this magnitude, if you were to paint every single thing up, that would cost you, even a very, very basic paint job will cost you in the neighborhood of, I think $700 to $1,000. If those are the criteria, then this is a magnificent insert, because it does put together every single thing for the board game in one consolidated format. However, if you have a standard where you have a very, very high-end paint job that costs thousands of dollars, you're really a little bit picky about paint scraping, paint damage, that type of thing, you're a little bit worried about that. Now, even though all of these miniatures are going to be, number one, plastic, and number two, they're going to be sealed with a coat of varnish, so there's going to be protection, then this insert is probably not going to fulfill your criteria, or it's not going to do it for you without significant modification. The reason is because while I was putting all of the miniatures in, I was paying special attention to this, because looking ahead, I know I am going to be having a very high-end painted set. And while I would say 80 to 85% of the time, these miniatures are going to be in position and they're going to be immobilized, that's only 80%. The other 20%, it's going to be tricky. They're going to touch each other, they're going to rub each other, they're going to rub the sides of the box. There's going to be some issues. Now, number one, these miniatures, which are going to be in their color bases, you're supposed to put them in these concavities, or these open rings. Understand that while technically they're supposed to slot in and then essentially not move, that's not the case. Essentially, almost, I would say, more than 60-70% of the time, they're going to be a little bit loose. I don't think that's a design flaw. That's just kind of the way it is. It's too difficult to cut it to the point, because again, remember that the board game itself is cheap. So the board game itself just has these plastic bases, which are going to be variable somewhat in size. So Broken Token can't, of course, make their their little tiny ring or area where you're going to hold them perfectly. It's just impossible. They don't know exactly what the plastic is going to look like. So they do their best, and in some cases the thickness is correct and it slots right in. Other cases it doesn't. So that's what these little wood slats are for. You put the base in, it holds it on the other end, and then this thing locks it in. And so when you do that, you can obviously put them in all sorts of positions upside down, and they're not going to move. What you're hearing is, of course, the clan tokens on the inside jostling around a little bit, which is fine. But as you can imagine, that immobilizes it. But when you get really close, I mean, we're talking sometimes less than a millimeter, maybe just like a razor's edge separating all of these miniatures. Now, granted, this is a huge challenge. There's 95 miniatures if you include the promotional Healy god of Asgard, and they got to fit all of this stuff in one core, box. So by necessity, they have to make it really, really tight, but sometimes it gets really close. And so while you're fiddling with it, trying to make sure that all the bases are in the right positions to be locked down by this little wooden slat, there's going to be some jostling, there's going to be some moving. So there is ample opportunity for the paint job to be affected, unless you're wearing gloves, for instance. Again, varnish is going to protect it quite a bit, and extra coats are definitely going to help. And obviously, you're going to be touching them while you are playing with them. So this might not be horrible, but absolutely, it's going to require some manipulation and some thinking to get these guys into proper position without having issues, again, paint rubbing in the future if you're moving around, for instance. A huge challenge is the Raven Clan, because a lot of the warriors of the Raven Clan have long spears, and putting them into position was really difficult. Even the best I could do, there were some areas where they were pretty close. And like I said, when you look at the Raven Shaman against one of the Raven soldiers, between the bird and his head, we're talking maybe microns, okay? So they're probably going to touch if there's any type of movement at all. Also, for the ship doesn't have a base. And so because of that, the ship can only be immobile if it's locked into its little ring depression. And for all of them, it did happen, but for one of them, I believe the Wild Boar, that ship was actually a little bit loose. And so it's not gonna flop around because, again, this thing kind of holds it, but it's gonna move quite a bit because it didn't seat properly. And because of that, it's going to sort of touch, of course, the totem of the other one. These are all just observations, meaning that I'm not going to ask for, like, for instance, a repeat or a replacement. These guys work fine enough. Even if Broken Token sends another one, you make it. The ship still has to be put in. So if you're going to paint the bottom of the ship, that paint's going to scratch because you have to literally sink the base of the ship into, again, the depression. And there's multiple other little tiny areas where, again, if your goal is to really try to protect a very, very high-end, expensive paint job and try to make sure that there's a lot of space between them, or not a lot, but just like enough space where you feel comfortable and you feel comfortable with immobilization, in my honest opinion, I don't think that this is quite going to do the trick, because it is very, very tight, and there are going to be a lot of little areas where I don't think that the miniature is going to be completely immobile and have enough safe separation from each other and the base and the walls to prevent damage in the future. Okay, which is fine if you paint them yourself and you can repair the paint job or make modifications. But if you're paying for a very, very artsy sort of project and you're looking at maybe $100 per figure or $50, $60 a figure, this becomes a concern. The same thing with the monsters. These are very large bases, and they are immobilized by sliding it through these little wooden, again, I don't know what to call them, wooden arms. There's not as much tension here as you think. It's not very tight, so there is no danger of snapping. There's a little bit of resistance, and they just basically snap into position. But as you can see, the immediate ramification of this is that the sides of the base is going to be scratched. That's inevitable. You cannot prevent that. This by itself, in and of itself, is not a huge problem, because once again, when you play, these monsters are going to be snapped into the large colored bases anyway. And so, the sides of it having a few scratches is just a little bit inconsequential. Even if there is, it's not a big deal, because again, you're not going to see it ever, realistically. If you play it, it's going to be, again, in the color base. And again, if the paint is so magnificent that you didn't want to play with it, then you wouldn't put it in this type of situation in the first place. You'll be displaying it in a display cabinet or whatnot. The problem though is that for some of these major monsters, if you're paying for a really, really great build-up, then they're going to do a lot of basin effects. And if you put the base too far out, you can see that it's going to run into problems with this part. This only has so much height, maybe a millimeter. So significant height of the base, you're not going to be able to slot it in. It's going to destroy the base effect. So this is going to affect how you do the base. And the only advice is you just basically can't do too many effects on the outside. On the outside, it better just be some simple dirt or grass, not too much height, or else you're not going to be able to put it in. And the same goes for all of these guys here, okay? So now let's get to the gods of Asgard, which has got some significant problems. Oh, by the way, just to let you know, I think in a previous section I had said that it doesn't matter because of the symmetry that I had placed the up. I had, I had basically put the board essentially upside down. There was an up here, and I had made it down instead. When I put the gods in place, I discovered indeed that is significant. You can't do that because if you reverse it, you prevent the bases from sitting flush so that you can put the lid and immobilize. So I had to take this box apart and basically redo it again, except with the base properly oriented. This did result in a couple little wood chips coming out because it had the original assembly, I think I mentioned, was so tight that you had no need for glue at all. But of course, since I sort of messed up and I had to redo it, the joints were a little bit looser, and there I did have to put a little bit of wood glue to get it done. But again, not a big deal, and it still fits together very, very nicely. The wood glue did its job. It's good as new, essentially. But for those of you who want to get these, do pay attention while you are disassembling and before you put anything together to look very carefully at the wood pieces, and if it's up, you better have it pointing up, as they say. So after that little aside, in terms of the problems here, what's significant? Number one, they essentially could not figure out a way to properly deal with Odin. Odin on the throne comes in two pieces. The Odin sits on the throne. It had to come in two pieces because, of course, if you're going to paint the miniature, it would be a disaster if Odin was all in one place on the throne. So they had to separate it so you can more easily paint it. Later on, you can, of course, always permanently glue or magnetize or attach the Odin to the throne. But within the context of this solution with this box, it's impossible to immobilize Odin. If Odin is on the throne, he will stick out of the box. If you don't have Odin on the throne, there's no way to secure it because, again, he's in this fixed sitting position. So their solution essentially was to have no solution. They essentially just basically put the throne in position, and then Odin just had to float somewhere. I think in their video, they just had Odin floating in the box. He does fit, although a more elegant solution obviously would be just to put him in the Ragnarok box, which is what I and other people who have the broken token insert did. The reason this is a problem is if every other single miniature was perfectly placed, there was a perfect solution for them, and you were very confident that all the other miniatures were locked into position without any chance of essentially having paint damage, then this issue with Odin would essentially be a deal breaker. Because if the whole point of this type of insert is to provide that level of immobilization and protection, then having a situation where you can't do that with Odin sort of spoils the meal, so to speak. And if that's not that big a deal, then obviously there are cheaper ways or easier ways of doing it where you can just basically toss all the warriors in one large box and just have them mingle together because of that. So, because again, you're not really that concerned about protecting the paint, etc. So the idea is you're supposed to try to put together a solution where every single miniature and every single expansion is properly addressed. That's the goal, and so it is a little bit disappointing that they were unable to meet that goal. So that's number one. Number two, the issue with Thor is a problem as well. He's raising his hammer above his head, and when you put that in there, absolutely the hammer basically is rubbing against the top of the box. So if that hammer is painted, 100% chance there's a 100% chance that paint is going to be damaged. It's a significant problem, and you have to actually modify. If you were going to use this to protect a painted Thor, you would have to actually Dremel or drill away, Dremel part of the side here, essentially, in order for him to have a place where that hammer can go. You would have to get rid of the wood here. This would have to go in order for him to protect that hammer. So, it's only not even a millimeter, half a millimeter problem, but this is a game of millimeters when it comes to these inserts, and so they kind of failed on the Thor issue as well. Now again, I had kind of looked at the Raven clan and all of the clan inserts, and those aren't perfect solutions either, not by a long shot. So in essence, then this is not horrible because again, it's not like everything else is perfect where you're not going to have paint damage. So all of that, I guess, could just be sort of lumped together. Another bit of an issue is that the Fire Giant sword is awfully close. I haven't put it into the box set, but this is awfully close. I mean, it would be nice if they put this lip up, but just by another ½ millimeter to protect that tip. Again, if you paint this thing and everything's layered on, this may actually touch the instruction booklet or touch something. It's not quite there. It's again so close. It's literally maybe at the level of the box. So again, for this set, in terms of immobilization and protection, you have significant, essentially deal-breaking problems with Odin, with Thor, those two for sure, and then to a lesser extent, the Fire Sword, the Sword of the Fire Giant, and also just trying to get all of the different warriors with the long spears, if it's not bent, into these solutions without, again, putting the paint job at risk. It's tough. My opinion, after putting all the miniatures in place, is that I think this is a very, very elegant, beautifully designed solution, again, for a non-painted, complete Blood Rage set, or if you yourself are very comfortable touching up the paint as necessary. It's not a big deal. It's going to be like a heavy use play set. The paint is tabletop ready, and you don't mind a few scratches here or there. There should be significant protection from the varnish. You're going to be handling it. It's good, and this is definitely a lot better than, of course, better than nothing. It's a lot better than just throwing all the miniatures in a bag or something like that. This is tons better than that. So as far as that goes, I think it is worth the $50 to have that solution. But again, if your miniatures are very highly detailed, if you spend hundreds of hours painting them, or if you've commissioned somebody thousands to do them, this is probably not the right insert to truly protect that level of paint without modification. I think it can be modified. There would have to be heavy use of magnets, preferably rare earth, and you would have to modify certain things to squeeze things in. For instance, one of the things I would look at definitely is to get rid of these cumbersome inserts here, and then you could get rid of that, and then what happens is that creates a lot more space. You would then create magnets to secure these into position. You would again free up enough space to, I think, create enough space to actually move the dwarf over and put Odin on throne directly into that area. Again, with magnets, you would not need the upper part. You would not need this part here at all. Everything would be secured in position with rare earth magnets, which, as you guys know, are very powerful. And with that, you would be able to, I think, pretty easily get enough space to create a place for Odin to sit. And that would take care of the Odin problem. Obviously, in this area, you just have to, you would have to essentially, again, maybe drill a little bit of a depression or figure out what to do with this thing. That you can overcome, again, to protect that. And obviously, you have to magnetize all of these as well. And if you magnetize all of these soldiers, then you have a greater control. All of the warriors, you would have greater control over exactly where to place them, and you wouldn't worry about the bases wriggling around and moving around. Those all have to be modified, Dremeled, extra space has to be made. But I think it is possible, again, with modification, you could truly isolate every one of these miniatures if you had the magnets and the space to modify. So there's that. This, of course, you can just put, essentially anywhere. You can even put it again with the instruction booklet. So those are sort of the things to think about. And of course, the ship then wouldn't be damaged because, again, you would not rely on the circle depression, the slot, to hold the ship in place. It would be all magnetized. So essentially, this solution, it can be used to make the broken token, the insert, is a great foundation. But again, if you want it to be perfectly suited for a high-end painted miniature set, you have to do extensive customization. And there are people on the Board Game Geeks forum who have done that to pretty good effect. But it's a lot of labor and time to do that. Okay, so anyways, I've talked enough about that for now. Let me see if I can actually put everything in and whether it does fit in the core set, core game box as advertised. So let's go to the next and last section to see that. Okay, so welcome to the last section of this broken token insert sort of review and discussion, all of that, what have you. So I put it together, I put it in the core set. It does go together beautifully, designed very, very nicely. So the way it goes is you have the two big monster inserts put against the side here. The one with the fire giant and frost giant you put here first, and then the one with the dwarf chieftain you put here second. Notice that there is a little tiny depression. This is perfectly centered on both sides to fit the actual board itself, okay? To fit the so-called the base. So you put these two in, and then this is the Ragnarok box. This is the pillage box. Again, notice the difference in height. All of this is going to create a situation where, again, it fits very, very nicely. Then at the very bottom, you have the card tray, followed by the Gods and Monsters tray, followed by the Monsters tray, all at the same size. You stack it right here. So card tray, Gods of Asgard tray, Monsters tray, sorry. So that creates now the side here, 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 and then the 6 clangs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 are stored vertically here. So when you have all of that, it's beautiful. Very, very nicely engineered, very nicely thought out, perfectly done. So quite happy about that, actually. And it's also very elegant. Nothing is touching here. It's just perfectly placed. And then when all of that's said and done, you take the actual board itself, and then you essentially put it right here into the indentation. It should slot right there, and it does. When you see that, you do have a little bit of space here, you do have a little bit of space here. And then remember, I talked about the problem with the fire giant sword, but if you just kind of shift them a little bit, you'll see that it is just, we're talking, like I said, a couple microns, not even a half a millimeter. It's not touching, it's doing pretty well right there, okay? So now you put all of that there. You are now going to have 6 clang sheets, right? One for each of the clangs. And I'll put that here. You have just a little bit of space left to be able to do that. So if you put the 6 clang sheets sort of, 3 to a side, and you just sort of stack a little bit, and put the Valhalla sheet here, you put the Saga sheet over here. If you do all of that, and then you put the lid on, it's going to sink all the way to the bottom. It's going to close with maybe a millimeter off. It might float just a millimeter off. But this is a little bit problematic. If you put this in the center here, this instruction booklet is going to result in significant floating, okay? The actual broken token, instruction I can just put on the inside, but that's not really the important thing. But the fact that this rule book, it just has enough thickness where if you then take this and you just sort of let it sit down and just let it sort of close, let's move it down, and then I think this is it. It won't go any further. You're going to be able to see that indeed there is going to be a couple of millimeters where it's floating. Now this is not the end of the world. It's fine considering everything that's been done to kind of get this together. This is not a big deal. You can still store it vertically, in my opinion, with no real problems. I plan to just store it horizontally like this. And if it's, again, if what you're looking at is a solution to take all of this craziness here and and just basically put it all in the same box, then the broken token insert is, it is amazing, in my opinion. Beautifully engineered, and it sets out to do a lot of things, and it gets it, I would say, almost 90% plus right. I mean, it does a great job of all of that. And again, the little tiny issues are kind of nitpicky, but they're there. But the foundation of it is fantastic. And again, with modification, you could create a situation where it is the answer. There are other solutions out there, and I'm going to take a look at some of them. There are ones which is, for instance, all foam. Now you're going to look at the millimeter or two here and think it's nothing because the foam will raise this up probably by 6 inches. But the foam, of course, is going to really protect the miniatures, in terms of the paint job, but at the cost of a tremendous amount of inefficiency in space. There's a lot of other, wooden inserts with different ideas, different designs, different layouts, but they all have, significant compromises. I think the one by, is it Maple or Meeple? It's called Viking Hein. That one I think is sold out, but, or if it was ever sold, maybe it just started as a Kickstarter idea, but there's a YouTube video on it. It does pretty well, but the problem is, for 4 of the clans, the leader is just basically tossed into a tray, just like Odin is for this insert. Again, that becomes a little bit pointless. Those leaders, if they're painted, you're going to have significant damage to the paint job. There is other ones on Etsy, custom ones. None of them are, by the way, licensed. Only the broken token insert is actually licensed. So all those others are not licensed. So there's another one where it does a pretty good job. It does not have every single expansion, taken care of. There is one in Germany by the Game Doctors, again not licensed, which looks pretty good. It seems to have addressed a lot of the things that I have problems with the broken token version. But again, unless you actually put it together and examine it, you really don't know. They were pretty honest. I emailed them inquiring about kind of my goals, and they said, these type of inserts, they do their best, but they also have to fit everything in, so they're going to be close. And they said if you really want to be completely sure about protecting the paint job, they recommended kind of the foam solution. But again, just like broken token can be modified with magnets to still achieve what you're trying to get, the Game Doctors can also be modified with magnets to better immobilize and figure that out. And so, when I have that one, I'll do a short review of that to, again, kind of talk about the pros and cons and that type of thing. So there are a lot of solutions out there, but I think in terms of just what's viable, what's efficient, what's easy to get, again, but Game Doctors doesn't even ship to the United States. I think the broken token insert is still pretty much the class of the league, so to speak. But again, it's just like, it gives you the foundation, but if you want to truly protect high-end paint jobs, you have to do some modification. You have to do a little bit more problem solving. And again, that's all par for the course in terms of what you have to do here. And it's just pretty interesting that at this level of compactness, at this level where you have to think of everything, literally a quarter of a millimeter becomes important. Several literally microns becomes important about the space and trying to protect and try to immobilize and that type of thing. So definitely I think I got my money's worth. It's a very, very well engineered insert. I gotta think that they made improvements since a couple of the earlier YouTube reviews. None of the pieces were very loose. They were all clearly labeled. So they are improving their product little by little. And again, hardly any glue required at all. So again, I think if you're fortunate enough like me to have basically every single expansion, then pretty hard to sort of beat this scenario. But I still have to think in the future about what to do again with the painted stuff. I do have various solutions kicking around in the back of my mind. With the foam, for instance, is one of them, and then modification of either this one or the Game Doctor's insert is another option as well, once everything gets painted. But for now, again, you can't beat this if they're unpainted and you just want to bring it with you to game night. It doesn't get better than this in terms of how elegant the solution is. So the very, very long video for all the different sections, but kind of showing, building it, the issues building it, as well as then actually using it. So I know there's a lot of those out there on YouTube. I'm a little bit late to the party, but hopefully I added something from my perspective that the others didn't. So you can, so we kind of complement each other, the different videos that are out there in terms of knowledge and perspective. And mine, of course, is the latest. I mean, I made this, October, 28th, 2018. So mine basically reflects, and I think, the latest of what the broken token insert is like, and how it's engineered. And so hopefully that is also, something of some value. So I think I'm going to, come off of Blood Rage for a while. I have spent a lot of hours taking care of it. I might make a few more videos just kind of as a communication tool with my painting team, in Europe. But for the further reviews on my channel, I'll probably, again, move away from here and do a few other interesting things, maybe do a statue or two to kind of get back to that for those of, people who are following my channel who don't really care as much about board games and things like that. So maybe next time, I'll do a statue review to sort of both celebrate, my very small achievement of 100 subscribers. I might put a little special statue review that some of you might find interesting. So until then, take care.